Okay, we continue our calculation. Now I share my screen. Okay, so we already calculated and tried every position for first week. For second week, for every variance, demand was changed for some part of percent, and we calculated every position for second week. Now we need to find information about next changing. Here, I opened all variants. First change in demand, it is second week for every variance. Next change in demand for some variants, it is fourth week. For some variants, it is fifth week. So please find fourth, third, fifth, your demand. When it is changed, please find. For example, for first variance, it is fourth week, next changing and other. Remember this information or write somewhere on the paper near your calculation. And how this demand change, for example, for first variance, it is minus 8%, for second variance plus 3%, and other changing. Sometimes, for example, for 9 variants with air conditioner, it is change minus 20%, a lot of just big changing. Okay, we find this information and come back to our example. In our example, next changing will be on the 6th week. We could find that in next changing was on 6th week. So first changing was on second week. Here I write 1, first changing, and next changing will be on 6th week. Now here it is only this example, so we could orient on this information. So if next changing will be on the 6th week, so third, fourth, and fifth week will be the same as the first week. So we write that demand from the first level for the first level buyer is the same as for first week. So we use this information here. We use the same information here for the next changing. So every week buyers buy 100 mobile phones in these local shops. And on 6th week, demand change minus 5 mobile phones in our example. But we write it here, but not everywhere here on the next position by and next levels, because everything we need to calculate. For example, buyers on third week, buyer buy the same position as the first week. We rewrite here this meaning. But for retail level of retail, we need to calculate that from previous position, demand is the same as demand on previous position in the same week from previous level. 105 is the same as demand on previous week on the same level. It is the same as demand on this week, this level. And 95, it is 100 minus 105 and plus 100. And we find this information. We used this formula. D demand minus ES and plus ES engine stock and initial stock in the first day of week and the last day of week. So we use this formula everywhere, come back to our demand and calculated everything. When on the next our changing, we calculated this changing and calculated every position. Our third calculation, third changing will be, for example, 9. No, for this example, we use, for example, 9 week, and it will be third changing. For every variant, we have 1, 3, and third changing. I opened our table and maybe do it not so big. Oh, good. So for every variant, we have changing on second week. The next changing, it is first changing of demand, it is second changing of demand, and it is third changing of demand. And we find how it change and how much percent will be bigger or less for our changing. So please write somewhere on your paper this changing and you could calculate it all for today, I hope. Okay. And our example. I think it is very good idea to use this information and you could write in your calculation the same, for example, or use different colors or use, for example, from which position, which columns we could use this information, and it is very fast for calculation. When we need to stop, we need to stop when the last week in our this table will be the same as the first week. But the same not when the third changing of demand, for example, and the next week we write everywhere 100. No, as example. No, we need to calculate, and when the last week will be everywhere in every position and manufacture and production will be the same as the first week. When this changing demand, they could depend from this changing depend everything on future, and we need to find when is stabilization stabilized. So we find on which week it will be the same as first week, and we could stop and could write the answer that this free changing was not so big for first level buyer, for example, and it is very big for the last level of manufacturer because we could see that buyers buy, for example, 1 week 100 mobile phone, next week 105, on the 6th week, for example, 95 mobile phone. It is not very big changing. But for the last level manufacturer, it is very big changing because sometimes they produced 100 mobile phone. On the next week, they produce 180 mobile phone. It is a very big difference. And on the third week, for example, they don't need to produce something because they have very good was on this manufactured territory, and the fourth week they need to produce 220 mobile phones. So it is very big difference every week for manufacturer. And when we use such system of prognosis. So it is, we could say that it is not very good for every level of supply chain because by the first level local shop, for example, it is not very big changing, but the other level, it is really big changing, and it is a problem for manufacturers, and we need to think how we could to stabilize it each. Okay, please calculate it for your variant. If you have some questions, you could write on your calculation this position, how we could use it in every position. We have time now, and you could calculate it, please. Okay, stop sharing maybe on 1 minute, and I hope that we answer all questions for the students, and I stopped records, and you could calculate it, and if have some question, you could ask me.